Hey guys, it's Beth, and today I have my card share from my DCWV Songbird Stack, and this is what's left of the paper and of the pad cover, so I have totally used this sucker up. But I know this is one of the videos that you guys have been waiting for. It's one of your favorites, getting to see all the cards that I have made from this pad. So I had made some note cards that went with my note card holders. There were like 3 or 4 different sets of those. So in addition to those, I've made at least 130 other cards. And most of these are A2, so they're 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's kind of the standard that I work with. And I have never ever used up this much craft card stock on a kilo pad project before. I ran out twice and had to go get more. So for those of you who've been following my videos for a while, you know I kind of have a process as to when I start the card making portion of my pad projects. There's kind of a process that I follow. And my first step is to pick out some of the obvious card elements and work with those first. So usually that would be any die cuts if it was a collection, or stickers, you know, if it came in a collection, or cut aparts is usually what it comes down to, or just focal elements that I could fussy cut out of the paper. So this project was no different. I started with some of the obvious elements that I had. This pad had a couple pages of cut aparts and then some border strips to cut apart as well. So this was actually a border strip, and I just kind of let it be a scene, almost like you were looking at a neighborhood of birdhouses. And then just backed it on some of the cloud paper that was in the pad, and then just have a happy birthday stamped onto an oval with another, like with craft layers behind it. So I managed to get a few of these. And then this was another border cut apart that I had, and I think I used up most of the other pieces of it on some of the note card sets that I did, but so I just thought that was cute. And then just kind of backed it on some of, they had some like tone on tone polka dot paper, and then added a thinking of you fishtail at the top. This was actually from the pad cover, so it was almost like a giant border strip that was a preview on the pad cover, and so I just cut it down to fit my card base. And then, I don't know if you can tell, I added some glossy accents to the centers of the flowers where there were buttons, just to give them some dimension to make them look like buttons. So I don't know that I've ever used this much glossy accents as well in a pad project. This was a cut apart from the pad, and it actually had a word over here on the side, and I don't remember if it was like marvelous or something, but I don't know, it wasn't one that I was able to tie into the scrapbook pages that I did or make it into a card sentiment. So, and there was also a green border around, kind of like this one, how it has the green border and then it has the detail and then words on the side. So I just cut off the word, whatever it was, as well as the green border, but I really liked the tree and the bird and figured I could just use it as a focal point on a card. And I didn't even add a sentiment to this one, I just thought it was really cute as it was. So it could be a thinking of you, hello, whatever you wanted it to be. There were 3 of those, and I just used whatever strips that I already had cut down at the time to go behind it. And then here was another cut apart, and it said "so happy," and so I just stamped "for you" to go along with that. And unfortunately, I wanted a "for you" stamp that went like all on the same line instead of like stacked on top of each other. So the only one I had that was all on the same line kind of got bigger. So I'm not loving the way that turned out, but it got my sentiment across that I wanted it to be like a congratulations card, so happy for you. And then again, I did some glossy accents on the center of the flowers just to give the centers some dimension. And I got 2 of those. And then if you watched my pad preview, you saw that there were some a pattern that had birdhouses. Like the whole page was just different birdhouses. And so since there were 3 of those, I took one whole page and cut it down, like fussy cut out all the houses that I could. So like any complete house that I could get, I cut those out. And then I just left the other 2 pages whole and used them in some other ways on my pad. But I kind of had envisioned in my head putting some of them together, like again, like this one strip was that almost looked like a little neighborhood. I wanted to do something like that with the houses that I'd fussy cut out. So I had some of this cloud paper left, and then there was this green, I don't know if you can see the flowers detail on that green strip at the bottom. So I just took that green strip and then did a scallop border punch and then layered that on top of the clouds and then put my houses on top of that. And I did ink my houses a little bit with some brown ink to help them stand out. And then I did a fishtail banner up here that just says congratulations on your new home. And I actually typed that on my silhouette and just printed that out because I did not have a stamp for that. So I just have different variations of that with what houses I had cut out. These are a little bit bigger, taller, so I had to put my banner at the bottom. And on this one, I didn't have any more full sheets of the cloud paper. This was just a partial sheet. So I went ahead and fussy cut out kind of around the scallopedness of the cloud and then put that on some green cardstock. And then of my 3 birdhouses, I popped that middle one up. I don't know if you can see that very well or not, but I just popped it up just to get it in front of the clouds a little bit. And then since it was a plain green background, I just added some flowers at the bottom. And then I have my happy birthday stamp. So I ended up with a lot of birdhouses off of that one sheet of paper. I felt like I was trying to use those up the whole time. So then there was one pattern paper that had a little flower scene kind of at the bottom corner, and I knew it wouldn't fit on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 A2 size card, and I didn't want to cut it up, so I just decided to go ahead and make a 5 by 7 size card with that. So there were 3 flowers, and again I did glossy accents anywhere that it looked like there was a button. And then at the bottom again I used that green flower pattern, and I did another, just put it into my scallop border punch just to kind of make it look like grass. And then up here I have happy birthday stamped on like a ticket, and I just cut this end off over here. So that's something to think about. If you have a pattern that doesn't fit on your normal A2 size card, think about doing a 6 by 6 or a 5 by 5 or a 5 by 7. I know they make envelopes to fit just about any size. So second, after I've used up my obvious pieces, I go to a card sketch that I can kind of mass produce with. I want to start with a card sketch that's going to get me a lot of cards and help me use up a lot of paper fast. So that's what I did, and here is a great example of that. This is My Favorite Things sketch number 167, and I got 18 of these. So I went through, there were 3 sheets of this green music note paper, so I just went through and cut them all down to whatever this rectangle is, and then so I cut as many of those size as I could out of the sheets that I had, and then did the same thing with my craft cardstock mat here. And then I had already cut down all the papers that I thought would be good to make my card mat, so I already had this dot paper cut down and just cranked out like these 18 cards. So there are different sentiments, because some of these I had printed all these off of my silhouette, typed them in and printed them out. Some go this way just because I felt the orientation of the lines on the music note paper where I wanted them going in the correct way as much as possible, but so that was just a little bit different version. And then I did run out of I wanted to save some of that dot paper, and so I had some kind of tan cardstock in my stash, and then just ran it through my embossing, or through my Big Shot with a polka dot embossing folder. So it gives it that similar look. So I did 18, and I still had some of that music note paper left. So I had quite a few sketches that got me a good amount of mileage on using up my stash, or using up the pieces of this pad. But this is Operation Right Home sketch number 106. And after I had cut down all of my neutral, or either the neutral, the tone on tone, or something that looked like it could be close to a solid, once I cut all those down to my card mats, I was left with something just shy of like 4. Like it may have been like 3 3/4 or something, so it wasn't a full card mat. So I did a bunch of different cards where I've just used that strip to cover most of the card front. And in this case, I used a big circle that I ran through my Big Shot. I have a stitched circle die set, and so I just did that with some various patterns, and then I had also fussy cut some birds out of scraps from the paper with all the birds on it, and then just stamped my sentiment directly onto the big circle. So this was a good way that I could use up some of the birds. I used up some of these shorter but longer houses that didn't necessarily, I couldn't fit very many of them on like the scene cards, like this one. So I have a bunch of those. And then most of these are just on the craft. And that one took up more room, so I just stamped directly onto the roof of the house my happy birthday. This is MOJO Monday card sketch 361. And I kind of varied the side, like which side the small square versus the big square went on, because the big square, the striped one, has music notes on it, and it went down the middle of my square, but sometimes it went more to one side than the other. So I just tried, whatever side the music notes went towards, I put my smaller square on the opposite side. And then I just typed in happy birthday into my silhouette and printed that out. Cut it down. So I got a bunch of these as well, and they're mostly all the same, just on different sides. This is CPS 217, and CPS stands for Card Positioning Systems, I believe. And this card you've seen me use before, this sketch, and you just have your rectangular element here in the middle and then a strip going across the bottom, and I usually use that for my sentiment strip. So here's another version of my happy birthday phrase. And so I use the bird paper on some, and then the flower paper. And then on the flowers, I did a happy Mother's Day sentiment. This is, that would help, Case the Sketch number 236. And so it's just another variation of, my rectangular focal point here in the center, and this one just has a strip and a circle at the bottom. So there's my happy birthday again. I love corny puns, so I couldn't resist the happy birthday. So and most of these are on green cardstock, and then I did a few on the red, which I kind of like the red better, but I didn't have as much of that. So again, another rectangle, and this, I don't have a sketch number for this one. I'm not sure where I saw it, but whatever it was, I couldn't easily print it out, so I just drew it out. And it has these little fishtails coming out from either side, and so I kind of did a variation of that. I needed a space to put my sentiment, and so I did it on the fishtail up here, but instead of ending my fishtail right here, I kind of pushed it in so that I could have more room to stamp on it to make it bigger. And so I just did the same thing with the fishtail. I kind of overlapped it across the top at the bottom as well. And then if of all the fussy cut birdhouses I had, if I could match it up to one that was on the pattern paper, I did that, and then later did some foam tape on it just to make it stand out a little bit better. And this one, it didn't match any of the houses on there, so I just put it on some craft cardstock to help it stand out. And this one actually has two that are on there. And did a couple with the red here as well. And another good sketch I got a lot of cards out of was Operation Right Home, number 236. And I have used this one a couple times before, but again, it used some of the 3 3/4 inch strips that I had left after cutting down all my card front mats. And so it calls for the circle element here, and so I just did a bunch of stitched circles that I have a die for, and then put either a fussy cut birdhouse or bird here in the center to embellish it. And I added my sentiment over here on a little scalloped, or on a fishtail banner, sorry. So different variations of those. This one uses a bird. And then I used whatever I had as far as strips. I tried to use what I had already cut down. So, got quite a few of those. This is Sweet Sunday sketch number 170. And this was a cut apart. And there were 3 of these. I used 2 of them on the 2 scrapbook pages I did, but it said having a good day. And again, I didn't feel like that was a good card sentiment, so I just cut the green border off as well as the wording at the bottom, and then just left the picture. And then on this sketch, you can see it calls for a little circle down here, and then you have your little fishtail banners coming out. So instead of the circle, I just used a bird, and then added my sentiment down here on one of the fishtails. So it's almost looks like the bird is saying, thinking of you. And then same thing, I did a circle this time and moved it up here to the top, my fishtails. And then this one is just not as bright and happy as the other 2. I had some of this cloud paper left. And so then I just moved the circle back down here to the bottom and did my fishtails. So. The next sketch is Operation Right Home, number 171. And it just used, 3 kind of skinnier strips. And so I had one strip that had the birdhouses on it, and then the other 2 were that scraps of that tone-on-tone cream polka dot. And so I just added some of the fussy cut birdhouses I had, like some of the tall skinny ones, to fit in those little panels, and then have my little sentiment here. And because I can't take the white space down here at the bottom, I added some circles that I had already cut out. And a different variation, this one's a little bit brighter, uses 3 different patterns that kind of all coordinate. And you have seen me use this sketch many, many times. I think I use it in every pad kill, but it is Operation Right Home sketch number 154. And it just uses 1.5 inch squares inside of a 3.5 inch square mat. So there's so many different ways you can do this one. Like that one has a little more color and pattern. And I only had 3 of the bird. Could only get 3 of the bird squares, so I just added the birdhouse on some cardstock there. And then here, this is actually a little piece of a flower that I had a scrap of the flower pattern paper, and I fussy cut out as many full flowers as I could, and then there were a bunch of them that kind of went off the side of the paper, and so I cut out the partial ones too just because I was trying to get some embellishments to use on the cards. So I used those little pieces of flowers in a couple places. Like here's a partial flower. And then here's one that I punched out just because I didn't think there was any way I was going to be able to fussy cut that one. And then this was actually a piece of a border strip that I had left. Same. So, I mean, this is a good example of all the different ways you can, you know, do the same sketch. It can look totally different. This is Operation Right Home sketch number 32. And this one was kind of towards the end, and I was low on craft cardstock. Otherwise, I probably would have matted these just to help them stand out a little bit better. But it's just layering the two different rectangles, and then I put my sentiment on a red scallop circle. So on this one, I was to the point where I didn't have a whole lot of pattern paper left. I was down to strips. And so I did mat these coordinating strips just on some craft, and then I had green was like the only color cardstock I had left, so I just used some yellow to make that really pop out. And then another version of the squares. These are just different sizes. This is Operation Right Home sketch number 60, and it uses 1-inch squares, so it uses 9 1-inch squares over here. And so on this one, there's multiple of the same pattern. And then on this one, it's just like all random patterns based on what I had left. And then again, because I didn't like the white space over here, I just used some scrap strips to add a little angle banner there, and then some coordinating circles that I already had cut up there. This one, there's no specific name, it's just October Card Sketch Challenge, sketch number 4. And again, just kind of layering like circle elements with a strip right behind it. And that one used another punched flower. And then I just added my sentiment down here at the bottom. And there's another kind of version of the rectangle. It's very similar to the sketch, except for it has a circle here, which I felt worked better with the leaf paper. I didn't feel like the leaf paper stood very strong on its own. But this is Sweet Sunday sketch number 220. And like I said, I used the leaf paper and then layered it with a circle and a different bird on each one. And again, got to use my happy birthday. And that one I did Happy Mother's Day. And then this is My Favorite Things sketch number 73. And pulled out some flowers, some silk flowers from my stash, as well as some buttons. And again, this one didn't call for a sentiment anywhere, so I just stuck mine coming out from the flowers here with a fishtail banner. Another version of the squares. This one is MOJO Monday, sketch number 238. And these are 1 1/4 inch squares. And so this was just kind of a hodgepodge of squares that I had left, or of the strips that I had left at the end that I could cut down into 1 1/4. And then I just put my sentiment on the scallop circle. I just kind of moved it around based on what I didn't mind covering, or just so I could not cover something that I wanted to be able to see. No science to that, just personal preference. And this just says sketch created by Pamela Young. There's no number on that one. And it's just a very like different layers of rectangle scraps. And then I put my sentiment here on this top layer, usually on a circle. And then at one point, there were a couple times where I ran out of craft cardstock. And so I was rummaging through my stash and I ran across, I had this tag-shaped card in my stash of other card bases. And so I kind of pulled it out, figured it would work for this one as well. Desperate times. This is MOJO Monday Sketch 435. And again, this is when I was out of craft cardstock, and I had these card bases that are, they're not white, they're kind of a little bit of, I don't know what you'd call it. They're just not like that bright white. And I think I found these at Tuesday morning, like sometime after Christmas. It was like less than 50 cents for a pack of 8. So anytime I can find card bases that are cheap like that, I try to get them. But so I decided to use this because I didn't really like the white showing a whole lot, but the softer white was a little bit better with this paper background. But anyway, so I had put these strips on and then put my squarey here in the middle, and then realized that I didn't really love it. Like the square wasn't standing out the way I'd wanted it to. So I came back in with my black fine point pen and just kind of tried to do some stitching on both sides of the strips, and that helped it stand out a little bit more, but still would have looked better if I could have layered it. But again, on here, if I matched up the birdhouse, and I popped it up on some foam to help it stand out a little bit. And then I have some sequins there in the center of my birthday wishes sentiment. And this is sketch SC355. I'm not exactly sure who that one's from, but, and again, I was using one of the cut-aparts that had happy on it, and so I came in and stamped birthday just to make it more of a card sentiment, and then layered it up with strips, and then I had decided to add some green cardstock circles just to give it a little bit more. And then these are just a bunch of kind of random sketches that I maybe got one card out of. It just says sketch by Jana, Eubank. And so I had, towards the end, I had a bunch of these flowers that I had punched or fussy cut out of that flower paper design. And so I just layered it on this bright yellow cardstock. And I swear, these totally remind me of fried eggs, don't you think? And I think I mentioned that in one of my other videos, but every time I look at it, that's all I can see. But I tried to use them as flowers here on my thank you card. And then this is Operation Right Home, sketch number 203. And so I had some red cardstock left that I put as my card mat. Excuse me. And then these strips of these kind of stitched stripe papers. And I didn't realize that at the time that I'd actually lined it all up so that the stitch stripes were in almost the exact same spot. But that wasn't my intention. I was just trying to stagger the tops of them a little bit. But anyway, I have my circle here with another fussy cut bird and just happy birthday. This was another cut apart, and it just said wonderful, and I happened to find a stamp in my stash that was in one of those sets where you can make different phrases, and so I was able to say you're wonderful. And I used MOJO Monday sketch number 497. Just layered it on another piece of pattern paper scrapped, and then I have a strip of cardstock going behind it. Actually, that's green pattern paper too from the pad. And this sketch called for little fishtail banners, and it just is Sunday sketch 090113. And when I had cut everything down, because you're supposed to make them 1/8 inch, 1 1/8 inch wide and 1 1/4 inch long, when I had cut this one down, I didn't want to cut into the birdhouse at the bottom to turn it into a fishtail, and then I ended up adding 2 more fussy cut birdhouses on these pieces, so I just decided not to do the fishtail part. I just left them as rectangles. And then I also added like this little button flower were things that I'd fussy cut out, and then I added 2 more flower punches. This one uses some rectangles, and it is Operation Right Home sketch number 25. And here are some more of those little bitty partial flowers that I had fussy cut out. I was trying to use up everything I possibly could, and so I had also wanted to give this pattern a little bit of color. And so I just randomly picked a corner for those partial flowers to go on. Trying to use up every little bit I could from this pad. And then I have like random cards that I don't have sketches for, but I've just seen designs similar to this in the past. So this one I had a bunch of strips that were like the exact same size. So it must have been when I was cutting something down, I ended up with the same size strips. They were literally like the same length and the same width, so it kind of worked out perfectly. But this one was just kind of a hodgepodge of different patterns, and I had put kind of like a doodle frame around the edge of the card, and then realized that I needed to tie these strips together a little bit better. So I came in and did some doodle lines on the strips, and then down here my pen slipped off of this strip, and so I kind of went back to fix my mistake and just kind of added extra little lines around all of my other lines to make it look like it was supposed to look like that. Sometimes you get it good at trying to hide your mistakes. Again, same concept, just turned different orientation, and this time I grouped them, kind of anchored them with this red cardstock strip, and then have my sentiment popped up on foam here in the middle. And this is that same version, anchored with red, just with a different pattern. And here's one with clouds. And it just so worked out that I had 2 with clouds and 2 without. So, and here are some more squares kind of put together in a quilting type pattern. I've done this one several times before. Sometimes I even fill the whole card front with it. But I actually had enough of these 1-inch squares that I could, do this whole card in one pattern, in the same way with the sheet music paper. But after I did this one, I realized that it was just kind of like there wasn't a whole lot of pop to it. So I had a bunch of these little aqua circle punches already punched, and so I just kind of placed those on there just to give it a little bit of color. And then I stamped Thinking of You directly onto my card base for both of these. And there was a border strip that had this music note pattern as well, but then it also had, I don't know if you can see it very well, like there was some little stitching up here at the top, and so I just put that one in the center to kind of make it, more of just so it looked like it was supposed to be only one instead of a random only one somewhere else, if that makes any sense. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not making any sense today. It's just one of those days. My voice is going, my mind is going. More strips, and just did 3 across, and it had this little scalloped stitching detail on those aqua strips, and so I decided my card had needed a little bit something, so I kind of took my white gel pen and went around the edge with a doodle scallop border. I don't usually doodle or draw on my cards, but this time I did quite a bit of that. And then just popped my thank you up with a red circle just to help it stand out a little bit more. And then different size strips, just kind of put those together. I did have at this point 1 piece of that song, the music note sheet music paper left, so I used that as my background. And then I had a couple of these houses left, and I actually had to cut this one down because it was really tall and it looked weird, so I just cut it down to fit on the circle a little bit better, and then stamped my sentiment up there. And this is a different way to use strips. I did this in some of my first few pad kills, and then I kind of forgot about it. So I decided to come back to it on this one, but this is a way that you can use different size strips as long as they're like not too drastically different from each other. So these are like all different size, all different widths. And you just kind of layer them together almost like a weave, but not all strips are weaved the same way, just to give it a little bit more interest. And then you can do as many strips as you want. You know, I've seen it where it's a little more sparse, and then sometimes everything's packed a little bit closer together. And then down here I just stamped happy birthday directly onto my card base. And then here is one more version of that where it is spaced a little bit more. And then I stamped just for you on a piece of, and you can't tell, it's a very faint light blue polka dot pattern that I had already punched out, so I was trying to use that up. So that is it. Those are all the cards that I was able to make with this pad. And next up will be my project wrap up, where I kind of review everything that I made with this pad and show you all at one time, because to me that makes the biggest impact, is you can kind of see what you get from one whole pad just by using it up. So love to know which card you thought was your favorite. I think mine is a tie between this guy with the sunshine and then these cards right here. I like those. These are two of my favorites. But I'd love to know what your favorite is, and if you got any new ideas from these cards, I would love to know that as well. Hopefully you maybe saw some new sketches you hadn't seen before, or just a way to use the scraps that you hadn't seen before. If you are interested in the sketches, I will list those below in the description box, and I will also include a link to my Pinterest board for card sketches that has all the sketches that I used today are in that board, along with hundreds of others. So if you are interested in any of the sketches, I will link that down there in case you want to check that out. But like I said, this was it. This was the last project of this pad kill, so I will wrap it up next, and then we'll be moving on to a new pad. But thanks for your time today, guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.